Jeff did, not Barb Brady. Jake the Snake Roberts, who like a whore in church in this obviously air-conditioned building when everybody else is cool, calm, and collected. It looks like everybody turned a bucket of water over Jake's head, and he did a promo that never mentioned his man that he manages or what the fuck he was coming in and taking money to do. And then in the last 15 seconds, Archer just jumped in and swatted the envelope of money, said, I don't want the money, I just want to beat somebody up. And therein lies the problem with a great wrestling promo trying to become a manager. He has no idea how to talk about other people and get other people over, and we all are a little less mentally nimble than we were when we were younger. Jake still can tell these dark and sinister stories with his promos, but sometimes it sounds like he starts in the middle and you lost something at the beginning, or sometimes it sounds like he left the end off, and he never talks about the guy he's managing.
Ross, we're doing a lot of damage.
That's what I thought about this. MJF was great. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was good to see Jake looking healthy.
God.
The fuck he came out there? I've never seen him sweat like that.
It looked like he was sweating like Elmer's glue or something. It was just...
That may be what's in his hair, his fake hair. Who knows? Lance Archer, I'm trying to think back. He was with Jake, and then he was with Lambert, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was Lambert's group.
No, he was with Jake, and he gave Lambert the big razor's edge. And then he joined Lambert. And then he hurt himself. And then he came back and lost the Texas Death Match that in the first match of his big feud with the world champion was also the last one. And now he's taking payoffs to fuck up Wardlow.
By the time they get Wardlow to MJF, that match of Wardlow versus MJF was an average-sized wrestler. Does it make sense to you that Wardlow should be going to the bigger wrestlers and maybe being overexposed? Possibly. So the Butcher was this week. Butcher's a bigger guy. He's one of the bigger guys in the roster. Much taller than Wardlow. Do you think it makes sense having him against all these big guys, or should it be a different direction?
All right, since we don't know exactly where we are in the timeline of this, we're just guessing. But my thought is what's been working has been working. Have Wardlow powerbomb the small guy 4 times and stand on his chest every week, sweeping it up with the security and these other little tricks of the trade or whatever, and somewhere right before you're going to pull the trigger on the match that everybody wants to see, Wardlow versus MJF, which better be on a pay-per-view. Then MJF pulls an ace out of his sleeve and has not necessarily a bigger wrestler, but a more top wrestler, a more main event guy, a better recognized wrestler, regardless of his size, somebody that people can buy, but also an experienced guy that's not going to botch spots with Wardlow because he's green and is going to be able to put Wardlow over as a dominant monster force while still keeping his cachet in the industry, whoever's doing the job, because he's an experienced veteran. And maybe you do that, maybe you save the actual, not only top guy, but bigger guy, or guy that's as big as Wardlow, for his final hurdle, his final labor that he has to surpass to get to MJF, and then make it a little competitive. But still, Wardlow, you keep him unbeaten, and you keep his momentum going. I don't think you just put job guys in, give them 4 or 5 minutes so they can be competitive for a couple minutes, just because the guy's the same size as Wardlow. Just no, keep him with little guys that are flunkies, and then feed him a fucking more recognized talent that you can afford to have do a job in a high-profile situation, and then maybe give him the big beat that he has to slay the dragon right before he gets to the fucking evil wizard or whatever.
And at some point, it destroys Spears.
Well, yes. And that, that could not even be a match. That could be just an incident, whatever the case.
This next one was sent to cornydrivethrough@gmail.com. There is no name signed to this.
Uh-oh.
But
Well, already, here we go.
This kind of feud matches piss. All right, the English may not be. This may be from someone outside of the country. This kind
Well,
of.
now there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that, but I'm trying to read it and I realize. Yeah, I mean, this kind of feud matches pisses me the hell off. I understand Randy Savage beat Hogan via countout back in the early 1980s, which isn't good enough. Every single time Hogan fought Randy Savage in a match, Hogan gets the 3 count. Why in the blue hell Savage never beat Hogan via pinfall ever? What is this? Don't let me talk about when Randy Savage was WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Savage only has the title 24 hours, and WCW books the match against Savage to get beat by Hogan via pinfall for the title. Jim.
Yes.
Can you please make some wrestling industry common sense of this garbage? How do you feel about Randy Savage always taking the back seat when it comes to Hogan?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I would respond to that question with the following. If a train leaving New York at 60 miles an hour leaves at 4 o'clock Eastern Time on Tuesday, while a train leaving Los Angeles at 70 miles an hour leaves at 3 o'clock Western Time on Wednesday, then how long does it take a grasshopper with a wooden leg to kick all the seeds out of a dill pickle? What the fuck was... I don't know what he just asked. I don't know what he just said.
Randy Savage never getting pinfall victories over Hogan, but Hogan...
Well, join the club. Who else did? Very few people.
Use something other than fire.
It wasn't going to happen when Savage was the heel and Hogan was the babyface, and then when Savage became a babyface, that match was never going to happen because Vince wasn't ever going to do that match. And then when fucking Savage punched Hogan in the fucking eye right before WrestleMania, what was it, 9?
Is that the story you've heard? Everyone always wonders how Hogan got the black eye.
Yeah, that's what Hogan found out that Savage Elizabeth had run off to Hogan's house and was staying with Linda because Linda and Elizabeth were friends, and Hogan didn't tell Savage that she was there. Which is why when Savage confronted him with that, he confronted him by punching him in the fucking eye. And that's why Hogan had a black eye at WrestleMania 9.
That's always been a rumor, but I had never heard it confirmed before.
I didn't know that it was a rumor. I thought everybody knew that was the deal.
Well, they do now.
Perhaps I've been mistaken all these years. I thought everybody kind of heard about that by now.
Does that answer the question?
That answers the question, yeah. That's the whole thing is Vince was not going to have Savage or Orndorff or Piper or anybody beat Hogan 84, 85, 86, 87, and then Savage becomes a babyface. Well, then, as hot as Savage was, Hogan was established. Vince, from the days of his father doing Bruno and Pedro at Shea Stadium, never wanted to do babyface versus babyface matches. That's well known, and thought that it would hurt one or the other. Bruno had pitched to Vince Sr. to do him and Andre, and Vince Sr. said, no, it'll hurt one of you. Why? And that was Vince Jr.'s thought on babyface versus babyface matches for years until then, the Attitude Era and everything became somewhat meaningless in that regard. But so he wasn't going to do that, and then I would have to think that I don't have a photographic memory of everything they did when they were working together in WCW, but I don't see that was ever going to be a thing, that Hogan was going to fucking drop a fall for Savage at that point in time.
And behind the scenes, they always kind of had a love-hate relationship.
That's one way to put it.
That's one way to put it.
Randy was intense, but here's the thing.
How many guys did he punch? Hogan? Road Warrior Hawk? Didn't they get into a fight backstage?
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't backstage. It was at a concert.
It was at a concert in Japan or something, wasn't it?
No, I don't think it was in Japan. Well, I don't know, but their wives there was heat between their wives. And that was that thing. It wasn't a wrestling show, but
Bill Dundee.
Well, you know, and that was over wrestling, but Randy was intense. But what I was going to say was, here's a guy. Imagine in 1994. Imagine Hulk Hogan doing this. Savage is booked in Knoxville for me for the Smoky Mountain show, and I used him against Bruiser Bedlam. I've told the story, but I was ready to do a DQ and let Savage look good and whatever the fuck he wanted to do. And he came to me at night. He said, "Brother, he's your top heel. I'm not coming back. I'll put him over." What? Yeah, and there was bells and whistles, and the Funks, the Dory Funk Jr. at least, I don't think Terry was there. Dory Funk Jr. interfered, and I interfered, and the baby faces came out, and there was shit going on, but he did the 1, 2, 3, the job in the middle of the ring, because he was wrestling business. His family had run Knoxville before. He knew it was tough. He was sympathetic to the situation we had going on in the territory, and he was willing to do business, and that was the most professional thing that any star of that magnitude could do when he didn't have to. But imagine, say, if it had been Hogan, right? Because they were, at one time, the two biggest stars in wrestling. Imagine if it had been Hogan. He wouldn't even have done the match to begin with. He wouldn't have taken the booking. And if he'd showed up, he would have wanted to leg drop everybody in the fucking territory. So, I couldn't say anything bad about Randy.
I mean, if you interviewed Hogan about it now, he would say that he was willing to do the job anyway he wanted to do. Just do a business.
Yeah, he would actually have said, "Go ahead and dress Mark Curtis up in the Ninja Turtle outfit. I'll put him over because it'll be business, brother." And then he would have figured out whether he'd come out at the end of it looking better. Hey, did you watch the Randy Savage biography, by the way? That's a question.
You know, I did, because I was going to watch it later in the week, but I spoke to this guy that said, people are really pissed at you for not watching the biography last week. I didn't know anyone else's reaction. So I did indeed watch the Randy Savage.
Well, it was on Twitter last week. The people were dismayed that I watched the show and spoke about the show, but you had forgotten the show was on, and some even chastised you for not going back to the on-demand service or whatever. So I said, this week we should talk while it's timely, and I especially wanted to see what you thought of it, because of the various things that I've thought of it. And the biggest one is, honestly, before we talk about the Randy Savage biography on A&E, we ought to talk about the Poffo family's wrestling promotion, ICW, because if you watched the Randy Savage biography on A&E, you don't know what the fuck it was, do you? Could you figure out from how they describe the promotion what the fuck it actually was, where it was, and what was going on?
It was just a family business that expanded outward from wherever they were located. And I will say, too, I noticed that Vince used to use it, and now Bruce is using it, the word fiefdom. All these promoters had their fiefdoms all around the country, you see.
So somebody said on Twitter, why were they calling it fiefdoms? Were they saying that all the promoters were thieves? Fief, F-I-E-F, fiefdom. In the old days, that was a tiny little fiefdom, an island unto itself, a self-ruled whatever. But actually, that was another problem I had, and I said this last week with Steve Austin. It was easy. He started in Texas, was in kind of Memphis concurrently for a short period of time, went to WCW and then WWF. With Piper, even though it was more complicated, they still took a more chronological tone, even though, as I mentioned, they conflated Georgia and Mid-Atlantic and skipped over Crockett, his name and his company whatsoever, even though they were using the footage. He was never mentioned, which was a big part of Roddy's career. But in this case, basically Randy gets hurt and can't make it in baseball, and returns to the family business, which apparently was their own promotion, and the first 5 years of his career never happened, and he's in ICW, and then we don't really know what the fuck that was. And all we know was that Lawler said, yeah, they were really talking about a match that was never going to take place. It was it confusing unless you knew the story to most people of what was going on there?
I think if you're a flighty viewer, you kind of are just watching it and not picking up on things. If you're a kid who's obsessed with wrestling and you're trying to follow along, it's going to be hard to figure out the exacts.
Yeah.
Who, what, when, where, why. The word outlaw never used.
Well, since you don't know a brief history of Savage's early years, since you don't know if you watched the biography, yes, what was it, 74? He started working, because that was, I think, the year that 74, 75. And obviously it was the family business, because Angelo Poffo had been a wrestler and was his father. And also it was, this is where it's going to get complicated. She said at some... So this past week was the Dark Side of the Ring episode on The Ultimate Warrior that followed the A&E biography on The Ultimate Warrior that we found out A&E deliberately changed their schedule and moved ahead of the Dark Side episode so that they would be the first ones to color public opinion on The Ultimate Warrior. And I don't know that their ploy worked out very well, because theirs was not real positive, and most people knew he was an asshole to begin with, but the Dark Side of the Ring show may have reinforced that somewhat. But I gotta be, I talked to the producers the day of the show, and in hindsight, they were starting to second guess themselves about the episode, because they tried to make it as balanced as they could, and not just to be a hit piece. They wanted to make it as balanced as possible, but in hindsight, overall, in the end, they felt that they may have taken it too easy on him, all things considered. And that just shows you, you know, people have talked about polarizing figures. This guy was not polarizing. Almost everybody that worked with him or had to deal with him didn't like it, didn't like him. If you notice, and we mentioned this, we brought it up, the A&E biography, everybody, all the talking heads on that program that were positive toward the Ultimate Warrior were podcasters and people who had been 9 years old when he was on top and were fans of his. They couldn't find one of the boys or the promoters to chime in on that. In this case, the Dark Side episode, they did a few, but still, it was predominantly his first wife. I was on there, everybody knows what I think. Jim Ross, who was on there, who was part of that infamous trip that we used to hear about Destrucity. But before we talk actively about the episode, a couple of things are interesting. Also, when we investigate this further, you know, people have talked about the controversial posts that he made on the internet and the rants that he went on, you know, because he was the conservative, anti-gay, you know, homophobic, right-wing, whatever. Did you know that all of those questionable posts that he actually put up himself on official pages, sites, whatever, have all been deleted? And the way that these things live on now is because of the people who saved them, screenshotted them, saved them, transcribed them, whatever, at the times they were put out, and that's what's kept the stuff out there. But someone has done as thorough a job as they, I guess, can do of trying to take the direct shit that he put up off the internet. But, of course, as we mentioned, it's still out there. I wanted to read a couple of things. Brian, before we talk about this show, can I read a couple of things?
Please, go ahead.
Hold on, let me, this is, I'm not even good, well, it's the Vice.com website, as a matter of fact, but this was a piece from 2017, so this is not capitalizing on or even presaging their program they just did, because Dark Side of the Ring was not a series back then. But some of the comments that Warrior made on the internet over the years. On Hurricane Katrina. How could they let this hurricane come here and do this to our lives? These people are expressing sentiments like that. Anyone who expresses sentiments like that is a kook as far as I'm concerned. Those that somehow believe people are directly to blame for the happening of a natural catastrophe don't deserve to be heard. In fact, they should be told to shut the hell up. This makes no sense already. These kinds of people contribute nothing toward repairing things to a better state. Truth is, these people thrive on despair and disarray. And physically and in the way they conduct their lives is nothing new to them. They forge their whole lives in and around it. This hurricane to them was nothing more than like rearranging the furniture. If we could be shown what general conditions they lived in before the hurricane, we would see that they had little respect for what they did have. We would see just how unorganized, unclean, and dysfunctionally they lived. They never gave a care for order, cleanliness, or function before, but now that they can get someone's attention who will possibly take over the responsibility of their life for them, they go on these tirades about how their life has been ruined. Their lives were already in ruin, self-ruined, ruined by the bad choices they made over and over. Beginning with the choice to sit on their ass expecting someone else to hand them a wonderful, beautiful, healthy, and wealthy life. And excuse me for being the one to say so, but if you have a dozen kids and no husband to be a father, there are some holes in your life plan that should be sewed up. Jesus. And they say, in case it isn't abundantly clear just who these people were, this article on the demographic makeup of Katrina victims should clear it up. Warrior is referring to, hold on here, let me click on that just to make sure I'm getting, yeah, basically the demographics of the people affected by Hurricane Katrina. Warrior is referring to poor, mostly black New Orleanians without cars. Had a lot of sympathy for those hurricane victims. It was like rearranging the furniture, Hurricane Katrina. On the injustice of Martin Luther King Day, he said Martin marched a few times from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama. It's only about 40 miles. He walked along paved roads with security escorts and modern comforts and conveniences.
Oh my God!
And there was also those people beating him over the head with fucking clubs, but you know, the paved road was easy to take a bump on. It wasn't like he got gravel bumped.
I must admit, I know some of his insane stuff, maybe it's been a long time, I did not remember the severity of some of this stuff.
Wait a minute, he goes on. He wrote a few jailhouse letters, plagiarized a great many speeches, and played up his last name King as if he was one. He led his best rally amid the monuments of Washington, D.C. He preached proper righteous behavior while he at the same time committed adultery many publicly verifiable times. Oh, and he had a dream. One to see a race of people freed completely from discriminate oppression. That's not even a phrase, but here was the on his speech on queer studies at a Conservative Alliance event at DePaul University. One guy without his husband and two physically repulsive butch dykes slurping on one another's tongues on the front row had a real hard time cozying up to my principled heterosexual obstinacy. So in an act of pure selfish pleasure, the guy got himself physically thrown out by the masculine security guard, unmistakably loving every single masochistic manhandled moment of it. So apparently he stirred some guy up so bad with what he was saying that the guy had to be thrown out, and he thinks the guy getting thrown out like this because of his masculine security guard. And the dykes, well, they ran out screaming and yelling like speared wild boars that I was a homophobe for making my remarks. Rumor has it that they decided to exit more because I was not getting stimulated by watching their poorly performed two night crawlers in heat act. Ah, the incredible selfless sacrifices the liberal loons will make on behalf of their cause. Oh boy, on the death of actor Heath Ledger, who had played a homosexual character in the film Brokeback Mountain. By today's standards, though, I do have to agree that he was a great father. Perhaps even greater than the Father of the Year, Hulk Hogan. After all, Leather Hedger, his kid is without a father, yes, but the negative influence is now removed and his own child has the chance for a full recovery. Because the guy played a gay character in a film. Here's what he said about Bobby Heenan, this miserable piece of shit that I'm glad that I've never said a good thing about in my life, the Ultimate Warrior. He said this: as for you, Booby Heenan, it's just too difficult to keep a straight face talking about the pure two-faced bag of shit you are and have always been. What with you also actually wearing one as a piece of body jewelry. This is when he had the colostomy thing. Or, he didn't have a colostomy bag. He's just making this up. You are dying, diseased on the inside, and no more time is left to get back any of the integrity that matters the most on death's bed. Imagine what it will be like, lying there taking your last breaths, knowing you hoard yourself out your whole life, and had to, in your final years, be faced with emptying your own personal shit bag, affirming to you the true value of what you achieved in your life. By the way, the Unleash the Warrior campaign was involved with Susan G. Komen Foundation about cancer. But anyway, yeah, that was some of his various comments. The fucking idiot, after he quit being the worst wrestler in the world and just became a general overall asshole. But did you notice, and by the way, one of the Dark Side producers said one of single of his posts used the word queer 53 times. I said this on last week's program, I'm saying this again. There's some Freudian shit going on with him and his attitudes toward gay people, actually gay men specifically. He apparently had a problem with these lesbians, but he was real shaky on the gay guys. Him with his bodybuilding and his fascination with the male anatomy and his doing everything possibly he could do to his body chemically to go from a normal-looking 175-pound guy to a 300-pound fucking freak in 2 or 3 years. He has conniption fits at the thought of gay men doing gay things. I'm telling you, there's some deep Freudian shit going on there. But the big reveal, by the way,
Outlander.
in the Dark Side program, they showed the news clip from, the early 2000s or thereabouts, where he said, my new wife got me into being a conservative. So old Dana is the right-wing lunatic.
Now, on the A&E biography, she blamed his conservative speeches on he just needed something to do, and he started listening to Rush Limbaugh on right-wing radio, and it hooked him, and he decided this was going to be his next gimmick. Not, I was a conservative and I made him come to my way.
Well, who was it that got him started listening to Rush Limbaugh, apparently? From his own lips. From his own lips. My new wife got me into being a conservative. So apparently she's as fucking lunatic and right-wing and racist and bigoted and homophobic and etc. What is it with Republicans and wrestlers that they all go gaga over bitchy, airheaded right-wing blondes? That's the entire female Fox News on-air lineup. It's like a magic spell to them. It's like Republican catnip. Get me a fucking vapid, airheaded, bleach blonde bimbo that says and does stupid right-wing shit and sounds like a bitch most of the time that she's saying it. And Republicans, and apparently now many wrestlers, go crazy over that. Should we call it catnip or cuntnip?
Catnip.
Well, let's call it catnip then for you two. But anyway, so this fucking guy, and I gotta hand it to Dana Warrior, and by the way, she's the one they put on the creative team. And apparently they still send her a check. I don't know if she's out there booking any fucking hot finishes. But she said at some point, well, you're the most unpopular wrestler in the history of the business amongst your brethren, and no promoter wants to deal with you, and nobody wants to work with you, and all the wrestlers think you suck and hate you. So, but the fans still love you. So let's make you a right-wing, homophobic, bigoted asshole and make sure they all hate you too. And I would like to also mention that she called the Dark Side of the Ring episode. Somebody asked her, said, "Are you going to watch that?" No, I not have any time to watch smut and filth. Well, the Dark Side of the Ring folks have partnered with Pro Wrestling Tees, and this is the first time I've ever plugged them. There is a smut and filth t-shirt now on sale at ProWrestlingTees.com from Dark Side of the Ring, where the proceeds will go to an LGBTQ charity to try to make up for some of the horse shit that the Ultimate Warrior, the Anabolic Warrior, as Uncle Dave used to call him back in the 80s, was spreading from his vitriol. So buy the smut and filth shirt and wear it the next time you know that Dana Warrior's going to the grocery somewhere. But anyway, the only thing I didn't like about the show, well, you can't really tell the story of how fucked up this guy was unless you do what we just did, or you do what I did on some of the program, and what, you know, they taped a lot more of. It's just reading the shit that he wrote, whether it was the letters to Vince McMahon, his delusional, psychopathic, egotistical letters where he was a legend in his own mind, was one of Vince's quotes, or the stuff that he wrote on the internet, or the stuff that he said out of his mouth that some colleges were bamboozled into hiring this lunatic to speak when you couldn't even understand what the fuck he was saying. But you can't explain to people what a lunatic he was unless you just sit there and read his own words. Because me, Jim Ross, Bischoff, David Manning, they had a quote from David Manning. You can't really explain what it was like verbally, because nobody would understand how universally unpopular and fucking reviled this guy was for everything he did. And he wasn't even being a lunatic back in the 80s, politically. He was just a fucking asshole, glory hound, fucking untalented, heavily pushed wrestler. So the program was basically just people giving their insights on this goofball, and nothing we said from last week has changed. Anytime you get somebody that's a talking head, that was a fan, that was 9 years old when Warrior was big, they love him. Anytime anybody's ever known him, met him, worked with him, or had him work for them, it's ended in acrimony and legal challenges. What did you think, Brian?
You know, overall, I think the A&E one may have been better. And I think that Dark Side should have stuck with one thing. And what I mean is, it felt like, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes of it was all about his first marriage. Not just all about his first marriage, but his first wife, and she seemed to know the business pretty well. I mean, just listening to her talk, everyone knows the terms nowadays, but the way she was using them, it was like, wow, she actually knows what she's talking about a little bit here.
She seemed like, and also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that I saw Missy Hyatt had tweeted that she knew Sherry Tyree from Georgia, because they all lived in Georgia, before she got with the Ultimate Warrior, or Jim Hellwig, the pre-Ultimate Warrior. I bet you that Sherry Tyree was actually a wrestling fan, because you could tell she used terminology. It sounded natural. You could tell when Dana Warrior was speaking that she probably learned everything that she knows about wrestling from listening to her husband talk. Imagine what that might have been. But she was, you can just tell the awkwardness with some terminology, and she wouldn't phrase things that way if she actually knew anything about the business. She came along afterwards.
I was expecting, and I'll get back to what else I was going to say in a moment, but I was expecting, considering the story and what episodes they've done, when Sherry starts talking about him being on the road and him having a day planner with all the women he's with, I expected them to have the Melanie Pillman interview here. You know, what were you doing on the road with the Warrior? That was her. Nothing. I was actually surprised by that. I expected we would see Melanie Pillman here.
Actually, that would, but you know, here's the thing: the A&E show was 2 hours, so take out commercials, and that's a little over an hour and a half. The Dark Side was an hour. Take out commercials, it's 45
But
minutes.
that's my point. That's my point. The Jake Roberts stuff was completely unnecessary, and it did nothing to add to anything, and it was completely wrong. It was factually untrue. He wasn't getting set up to get a WWF title run against the Warrior in 91. He was getting set up for a feud with the Warrior in the summer of 91 when the Warrior didn't have the belt and Hogan had the belt. But in no time was Jake being set up to have a run against the Warrior when he was the champion. That whole segment, everything Jake said there was completely untrue. And it still got into the documentary.
Not any of the bad stuff that he said about the Warrior. That wasn't untrue.
And then he's standing there with a roll of quarters at the Hall of Fame. He's going to knock at the Warrior. No, he wasn't.
Well, no, he wasn't going to do that. Because, but I was assuming it was the Intercontinental title because I thought that they were going when Warrior came back at that point or during that time, he had dropped the WWF belt, but they were going to put that on him, and that was going to be the run with Jake. But no.
Because look, here's the timeline, right? Let's go to the timeline. Let's start with 1989. Jake's in jail for what was it that time? Assault or something. That's when they do the DiBiase thing where they injure him. Warrior's in a feud with the Heenan family. Rick Rude, then Andre the Giant. Then he goes from that into the Hogan program, leading to the match at WrestleMania. After WrestleMania, Jake, by the way, babyface. Jake's still a babyface coming out of that. The Warrior goes right into another Rick Rude feud. By the end of the year, Jake, still a babyface, now blinded by Rick Martel, building up to the blindfold match. Warrior loses the belt to Slaughter because Vince wants to exploit the Persian Gulf War. Warrior goes right into a feud with Randy Savage, who wants to take time off to try to start a family. He's going to retire. Coming out of WrestleMania, it goes into SummerSlam. Hogan and Warrior would sit as the referee against Slaughter and the Sheik and Adnan. But right before SummerSlam, they start doing these little vignettes with Jake, who's still a babyface, trying to teach the Ultimate Warrior the dark side. That's where that clip of the Warrior with the snake from that thing was. That was right before SummerSlam 91. It was right before the Warrior was fired. Bret Hart wins the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam 91 against Perfect. Warrior wasn't going to be in the hunt for that belt. I don't think he was going to be in the hunt for the world title at that point either. So I don't think Jake has any idea what the fuck he's talking about. Thank you. Off the top of my head, ladies and gentlemen.
That's why you're on the program, off the top of your head from 30 years ago. Fucking hell, that was amazing. Well, so basically what you've said is Jake the Snake told an untrue story. Imagine that.
But that's my point. I think with Dark Side, sometimes they have a really good story and they're running with it, and then all of a sudden, for no good reason, there's a diversion that doesn't actually help the story. And the Jake thing there, the Jake stuff to me was a bit of a diversion. I think they should have just focused on his first marriage. And the whole thing should have just been just about that, because then after you break up the marriage and she's still talking to the Warrior, after she's done talking with him, they basically try to compress, 15 years or so into 3 minutes.
Yeah,
and that's where you get the revelation about the fact that the new wife was the one feeding him the conservative stuff. But I think it was a little disjointed because of that. The Jake stuff, completely unnecessary.
Well, speaking of Jake, he's going to be heavily featured next week because I've been waiting for this one. I believe I will be on. I was interviewed for it. I have not seen a preview yet, but I believe I'll be on it. But Jake will be on it, and more importantly, it's the whole Grizzly Smith and the Smith family story. And I've just been. This is one of the. I don't know whether they said one of the better episodes. I don't think they phrased it like that because of the subject matter. It's not actually good. But this is one of the more striking episodes. That'll be, this coming week, this coming Thursday on Vice. Thursday night, 9 o'clock, Grizzly Smith and the Smith family. And it should be interesting. And it has the tie-in that Jake is a big modern-day star. This is the farthest back they've gone in wrestling history to start a story, because Grizzly started in the late 50s, but they've probably got some stuff here that you haven't actually heard publicly before, and I know there's a lot of stuff that's going to be said that wasn't known at the time, even back in in the 80s. So we'll see how that is received. We will obviously be talking about it next week on the program. Last week, of course, we had taped the program literally hours before the death of the Ultimate Warrior, and I want to say this right at the start. I didn't know the guy very well. The only time I'd ever really met him and worked with him was the brief period of time that he, in 1996, when he came back to the WWF, and even that, our interaction was limited because he dealt mainly with Vince, and it didn't last long. And I don't have anything against the guy personally, and he's got two beautiful daughters, as we saw in the Hall of Fame ceremony, and he was married, had a wife, and I, wish ill on nobody, and he passed away. He's a year older than I'll be this year, and passes away, and nobody wants to see that, so I'm not knocking the guy, but I really had no interaction with him, didn't know him, and was never a fan of his, and I've actually used I've used his name as the male version of Sable, and I've also said the Sable was the female version of the Ultimate Warrior, somebody that was hired purely for their look, their body, and had no talent for the industry they were in. But I read the obituary, the story that Dave Meltzer did in the Wrestling Observer, and I learned some things. I was shocked at how over the Ultimate Warrior was, because I didn't realize that at the time, and also I didn't know that any wrestlers viewed him as their favorite wrestler when they were growing up, because, and this is not knocking the guy, my peers, our peers at the time in the 80s, at least mine in the NWA, scoffed at him, because he was obviously there specifically because Vince McMahon liked bodybuilders and pushed him because of his body. He was never a good worker. Nobody ever said he was. He was never a good promo. You couldn't understand a word he was fucking saying, but it connected somehow with the WWF audience, and this brings up the fact of how different the audiences were, the NWA and WWF audiences, because not only the NWA wrestlers laughed at the guy, but the NWA fans laughed at the guy as they were laughing at the whole product. And see, I never watched the WWF product in the 80s. And people don't really realize that. I mean, I saw the have-to matches, Savage Steamboat at WrestleMania, and then later on, Bret Hart and Kurt Hennig at SummerSlam. The few and far between matches at that time that would have belonged in an NWA ring. But, I didn't realize, the guy drew some serious money. He was in the right place at the right time with the right push. And he was kind of... He had a lot of heat with his contemporaries because everybody knew he couldn't work, and working was, if he could work, it probably wouldn't have made any difference. It was all about the look and the body and etc. But see, I said I'm not trying to knock the guy, and it sounds like I'm knocking him, but in all seriousness, I didn't realize the kind of money that he drew, and I only saw some of his TV squash matches. I never even watched WWF TV because, to be honest, when they started the Tuesday Night Titans thing in the early 80s, when the War of 84 was just starting, and I saw that, they were making fun of wrestling. I never liked the WWF product. That just put the nail in the coffin, and I instantly tuned it out, and I never watched it. I watched every wrestling promotion in America except the WWF because I thought they were making a mockery of wrestling. And then when Vince came out and said it's Sports Entertainment did that made them the mortal enemy in my eyes. But as I read the Wrestling Observer piece, I saw that even though his contemporaries had mostly very little respect for his in-ring ability, a lot of the guys now were kids growing up, and the WWF appealed to kids then, but also they appealed to certain parts of the country. The NWA we were even with the WWF in Baltimore and Philly and Chicago. We owned everything, south of Baltimore all the way to Florida and out to Texas. The WWF couldn't compete there. And then everything on the West Coast and in the upper Midwest was Vince's. And, never the twain met. But, I learned some things about how over the guy was for that brief period of time. And, it's a shame, but what fucking incredible timing, right?
That was the one thing that really struck me, is that, he has this amazing Hall of Fame induction. He goes to Raw on Monday, cuts a promo that sounds like his swan song, and then the next day, gone. It's really quite something.
So it's and and once again, and I mean nobody's hiding from this. When you use that long, and obviously they saw the workout video of him just a few years ago. The veins looked like garden hoses, and something's going to happen, and it's not good for you. And also, he was a guy who was not a wrestling fan growing up, didn't get in the business because he was a wrestling fan. He got in the business because he was a bodybuilder, and that, fucking slimy Rick Bassman in California, who ran that fast food wrestling school, and I told him one time I'd like to skull fuck him and leave his remains in a ditch because he's a leech on wrestling. But he got a bunch of guys together trying to get into wrestling himself by getting a bunch of guys around him that actually, had a shot, and he was going to sap their appeal. He put them together, and it wasn't Warrior's fault that he got so much heat with the guys in the business because he wasn't a fan. He didn't get in the business because of love of it. He got in the business just to make money, and he didn't know any different. And a lot of the things he said to people were a result of that. He came from a different world, and he wasn't a guy that was going to go out and work the territories to learn, how to do things, because he had a very short period of time. And as a matter of fact, we'll talk to our guest, Dr. Tom, who we're going to get to here in a minute, about the first time I ever saw the Warrior. He was on a card in Louisville here with Tom Pritchard, but, he had a very brief period of time to learn in the territories, and then he was snapped up by Vince, and then he had his run, and then he was done. So, it's sad, and our condolences to Warrior's family. What I was saying about his capability of wrestling is not meant as a knock on him, because he came from a different world. He was in the right place at the right time, made a lot of money. And it's too bad that he died young. But at the same time, I learned something. I learned that a lot of, today's wrestlers, actually, he was their hero when they were a kid. And I would not have known that because at the time we were looking going, Jesus. But that was a lot of the rub of Vince McMahon exposing the business and pushing guys who were built, as they say, for show, not go. And, we carried this over because we were having so much fun, and we've not even scratched the surface yet. But I know everybody, Wayne wants to talk about the WWF and your experiences there. We talked about, on the experience about, you loved working with Randy Savage, even though you were two different people. If you care to, who did you not enjoy working with, or what were the things in your career there that maybe didn't click?
Every time that Jake Roberts would go into rehab, I know Jake's all clean and sober now and everything. Yeah, right, okay. He says, I guess prescribed Oxycontin makes you clean and sober, but that's beside the point. I don't give a shit.
The views of the honky-tonk man are not necessarily those of your sponsors or hosts, but they may very well be, but okay. Not necessarily.
But there again, here I get the Intercontinental belt, which catapults me, and you know this, Jim, from mid-card level status up to semi-main event, main event status. So I finally get that one break I'm looking for after 20 years in the business. Then here, Ricky Steamboat, I'm leaving, and I'm not going to work any return matches. So, okay, he came back, worked a couple return matches, and then he was gone. Now, it was all booked out for him to work these return matches for 4 or 5 months. So in the meantime, and you know this in WWE, if a guy leaves or he quits or he's in rehab and he's gone, then we have to have a substitute. Well, now we make it a non-title match. Honky Tonk Man loses every night in the middle of the ring. The only time, and I said this on the other show, the only time I ever won any matches at all was TV matches on TV. Once every 3 weeks that I was on, I would win. But every house show, I had been beaten time and time again.
And that's a good point. The people don't understand the conventional wisdom in those days was when you substitute an advertised match, you don't want to piss the fans off further, so you let the babyface go over regardless of what the situation is, which meant that you, through no fault of your own, because the other guy took off, were having to do all these jobs because there was a substitute and they were trying to make people happy.
Right, and then of course it's the Intercontinental title. It's a non-title match. It's a main event. It's sold out. And here you got the substitute, and he's all, you know, trying to make a name for himself now. Like they bring in Crusher, went with Chicago, and Milwaukee, and Denver, and San Francisco. And this guy, how the Crusher, God bless him, he's not around to defend himself. How he ever made a nickel in this business, I do not know, but he beat the living shit out of me.
Well, he was 65 years old then, and he was practically immobile.
And Jack Lancer would stand there with that one-eyed, cocky eye of his with that cigarette in his mouth and say, "Hey, how do you get all these old-timers?" I said, "Because these fuckers won't show up and they're all in rehab." That's how I got them. But anyway, I would lose I lost every night, Jimmy, and here's the thing. Losing is not bad. I'm not complaining about losing. The hardest part of the job was to go on television then every week and convince the people that I'm still the champion and I'm the greatest of all time and I can't be beat. And even though they saw me get my ass whipped every night.
Well, they say heels are supposed to lie, so you were lying.
Yes, I was lying, and I tell you what, I was good at it. Now that I became honest, I couldn't get a job anywhere. You know, I get fired. So, like WCW, I guess.
Well, speaking of which, should we go there? Anything else about your WWF tenure that just comes up?
You know, there's been a lot of misconception about the thing where I didn't want to drop the belt to Randy Savage on the big show on television. That Randy being the name Randy Savage or Macho Man had nothing to do with that. And Randy and I had we talked about it before it ever happened. And I told him, and he was okay with it because he was a businessman. And he wouldn't have done it the same thing either. And that was one of the biggest television audiences they ever had. Something like 30 million people watched that Saturday night main event. And Vince had always told me, my deal with him, a handshake deal, and I said, just keep me good on TV. If you give me a chance and I sell tickets, pay me. If I don't sell tickets, fire me. I'll take my bag and go home. Just keep me good on TV. And he said, I will. And then here we come. Now he wants the job flat out finished in the middle. Well, what happens to me?
And back then, guys, and once again, for today's fans and for the young wrestlers listening today are thinking, what are they talking about? Why would anybody care about it? It was important, not necessarily whether you won or lost or who you won or lost to, but the time, the venue, the place, the platform that you were winning or losing on was important, and the professionals. How many jobs did Hulk Hogan do on TV? How many times did John Wayne get beat in the movies? How many times did the movie end where he was doing a job flat of his back? He may have got heat on John Wayne, but Bruce Dern's the only one that ever killed him. And you know, so it was important, and the people viewed it as such, and it determined what kind of money you made, because this was before guaranteed contracts where, you know, if you got a sty in your eye and you were home for 6 months, you could still get paid. This was when you had to go out.
It determines your future earnings.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, I didn't even have a guarantee to do that job that night. None whatsoever, nothing. I didn't know what I would have gotten paid. If he said, listen, I'm going to give you $20 million, I want you to get this guy over and get him over strong, Randy would, if I had done that, Randy would never have been world's champion. He'd been Intercontinental champion, and probably, I don't know what would have happened. So the whole history of everything, but it was my decision to make, and mine only, because I control my own destiny. And now, of course, now you just said it, they don't control their destiny. They have no, they sign up and they have to, they're only robots, they're puppets, there's no other game in town. There was a big company called WCW or Turner Wrestling back then, and Jim Barnett was there, and Jim Barnett, I called him and told him what was going on, and he advised me to know, and they had a big meeting set up in the Bahamas for me to go to, and everything. So, just going back and staying with WWF at that point in time, I don't know, it could have been a mistake for me. It could have been a big mistake because, I mean, Vince never forgets.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, the fact is you stayed there. What would happen now in 2014 if one of the champions said, no, it's not the right time. I'll do a job, I'll drop the belt, but not in this particular place. It's not right for business. Where would their future be?
Oh, gosh. Jimmy, There is no future. You're out of business. And, you know, I think, I don't even know the contract structure anymore, but I'm sure you have to go along with the battle plan and all those things. But, you know, back then there was no contracts at all. It was one little page of single space typing and $50 for a TV show, and you were guaranteed 10 TV shows. So it's $1,500. What the fuck? You ain't gonna beat me in front of 30 million people out here.
But the fact is, you didn't do that job. You didn't do that job, and you stayed with the company, and you were still used in a feature position because you sold tickets.
Well, yeah, that's what it was all about, and I couldn't understand it. Randy and I had come off a Canadian tour. Every town was turnaway crowds. I mean, turnaway. And here you're going into this show, and this is what you want. But the thing that bothered me the most was, we'll reprogram you. How the fuck you gonna reprogram me? To do what? Shave my head and come back as a German? Come on.
And, you know, that was the art for so many years of being a booker in wrestling, was the ability to present what you wanted to the talent, not that was going to win, because they loved it regardless, but to the talent that was going to lose. You could present it in such a way that they would say, oh, okay, you sodomized me with that rusty fishing knife, and then we'll move on.
Well, yeah, I mean, people said, hey, Honky Tonk Man, you must have backed into the position for that belt. I sure did. I backed right into it, I guess. But, you know, the thing is this, Jimmy, I have no problem any time in my career, but I didn't want to leave the WWE, and I wanted the WWF. I wanted to stay there, and I had a good thing, and I had worked my whole career to be there. That was my dream come true, is to be in that company on that level. And if you don't want to strive to be at a higher level, get the fuck out of the business. But
as a matter of fact, what year was that?
But anywhere else I went, when my time was over and I was leaving the territory, I did what was supposed to be done. I did what was supposed, except for the Florida thing we talked about on the other show with Jerry Briscoe and Buddy Rogers, when Buddy Rogers was booking. They were going to shoot on Larry and I, and Larry was panicked and said, we're getting the hell out of here. So we picked up our paycheck, and that Wednesday, and they said, yeah, you boys are going to make it to Miami. Now, yeah, we are. Hell, by the time Miami show started, we was down there in Atlanta.
But, well, and at the same time, in that position that you were in, it wasn't going to do anything for business if you won or lost, or if you were even there. You were going to take a main event position somewhere else. So it didn't hurt.
You know, that's what Larry told Jerry on the phone. I heard Larry, I was standing there, and Larry said, Jerry, why do you want us on TV now? You haven't used us on TV in 4 weeks. And Jerry Briscoe said, well, it's only the right thing to do now. I'll work with your partner, and you can work with Buddy Rogers. Well, we know Buddy Rogers, what he was doing and how he was, and we know about the Florida office. Jerry and I are great friends now. We always laugh about it, about Jerry Briscoe wanting to shoot on me and wanting to hook me.
Well, what year was it where Barnett had the meeting set up with WCW for you, on that job thing? Was that 89 or was it 90?
It had to be. No, I was out of the belt by 90. So, because yes, I lost the belt to the Warrior, but this had to be in 88, 89, somewhere in there.
Well, I believe I remember that. I remember that because I was on the booking committee when Flair was booking at that point. Turner had just bought the company, and I think I remember him having that meeting scheduled and then it falling through because you decided to stay.
I was going to meet with Jim Barnett, Jimmy Crockett, and Jim Hurd.
Yep.
The meeting was set up for us to go there, and Jim Barnett told me, he says, next time you call the office, make sure that you use your real name. Because I had called there and I said, this is Honky Tonk Man calling for Jim Barnett. Because, see, Jim knew that there was moles in the office, and there might be moles answering the phone. Because Jim had abruptly...
Well, then what moron... Well, I started to say what moron wouldn't know your real name, but then again, when I was working in the WWF office in 1996, one of the secretaries gave me a message when I came back from lunch and said, a Harvey Race called for you.
Yeah, so, but yes, but there again now, Jim had abruptly left WWF back then, and had gone back down for Turner and for Crockett's and them guys, and I had, I'd not worked for Jim a lot, just a few shows here and there, but he knew of me, he knew of my whole history. He was another historian very much like you. So, I mean, I could pick the phone up and call him, and that was important, and that's what I did. And he said, well, the next time you call me, use your real name, because he knew that none of those secretaries would know who the hell I was.
Yeah, and then it wasn't long after that Jim Hurd fucked Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson on their deal that Flair had made for them to come from WWF back to WCW, but of course Tully, not caring because he was leaving, got a failing grade, shall we say, on the periodic drug test, and Hurd would not honor his commitment to hire him based on that, and fucked Arn out of an extra $100,000 that he had promised him because, well, I'm not getting both Tully and Arn, so Arn isn't worth as much by himself. So no WWF talent came to WCW for the next 5 years after that until Hurd was long gone and Bischoff had got him to open up the checkbook.
Yeah, that was true, and you know, Rick Rude did go in for, I think, for Jim Hurd, and or one of those guys, or maybe shortly after that.
I think that was Francis Ford Coppola, Kip Fry.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yes, yeah, that guy. But anyway, Ricky told me about his deal down there, and he says, you know, I went in. I said, well, I'd like to have Y-class tickets. They said, sure, okay. And I'd like to have this. They said, sure, okay. He said, damn, I fucked myself. I should have said first class. They would have signed off on it.
Oh yeah, that's.
He said, man, they're signing on everything. So I'm thinking, why did I let Jimmy Hart tell me, listen, don't do this, man. Call Vince first. Call him and tell him. Call him and tell him, do not leave. Don't take the bell. Oh, I said, man. And Rude's telling me all this, and I said, boy, did I really fuck myself.
Well, that's why when Kip Fry took over, Bill Watts nicknamed him Francis Ford Coppola, because he was just giving away this. He was giving guys performance bonuses to show up for work.
Yes,
It had a guaranteed contract, but if you showed up for the pay-per-view and actually had a match on the pay-per-view, you got a bonus on top of that. And he gave away the store, and they ended up losing millions and millions of dollars under him. And then that's when Bischoff stepped in and said, "Hey, I served the second course at the Last Supper. I can get you out of this."
The meat man, the guy that drove around in a pickup truck selling the frozen meats out of the back of the truck, Eric Bischoff. You know, I gave him that name.
Let's talk about Eric Bischoff. What do you think about Eric Bischoff?
I don't think about that prick at all. I tell you what, if he was laying on the roadside and he was dying of thirst and needed a drink of water, I wouldn't piss in his mouth. Actually, if he was dying of starvation, I wouldn't defecate in his mouth.
How did you finally went down there for a little while, right? Or did you?
Very. You know, Jimmy, I was there, and for all the fans, and I tell them, they said, what was that song you had in WCW? I said, I wasn't there long enough to learn the words.
How did that come about?
It was one of those things where, once again, Jimmy Hart orchestrated this whole deal because Hogan was going in, and Hogan wanted, you know, some friends around him that Hogan could trust and knew that if we were there doing the setup work and the prep work and getting the matches over, it would be better for him and make him a bigger star, which, you know, that's normal Hoganism, which is, that's his deal.
Well, that's been every top guy in the business since Strangler Lewis has had that M.O.
Well, yes, and then, of course, you know, if you're a booker and you got 4 or 5 of your buddies that you know that can go out there and get the job done, of course you're going to bring those guys in. And that was the situation. And when I went there, the first meeting with Eric Bischoff, I got a call first from Ric Flair, and Jesse Ventura was on the line. And Jesse did the setup call, you know, hey, man, how you doing, blah, 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 you need to come down here and be with us, and that old bullshit, that old buddy stuff. And then Flair's on the phone, yeah, can you send us a taper and come down so we can maybe get an audition on you? I said, audition? What the fuck? You've known me for 15 years, man. I don't need to audition. Hell, you don't audition a guy you already know. So anyway, they brought me in, and the first day there, Bischoff walks up. I introduced myself, and he says, I was never a fan of your character. I didn't like it at all, but Jimmy Hart has been on me, and the only way I can shut him up was to bring you in.
Well, that didn't start out good.
And I said, I hope I can change your mind. And I walked away knowing, here's a guy giving out contracts, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
So that lasted for about 4 months, and then came to put Johnny B. Bad over, and you know, and I said, fuck this. I ain't got no contract.
It was kind of like Johnny B. Bad and you. It was kind of like Motown meets fucking Sun Records.
Yeah, and it was, you know, and guys would come to me. Arn came to me once. He said, "Man, we really appreciate what you're doing for him." I said, "What do you mean?" "Oh man, you're going out there, you're having great matches with him and just getting him over so good." I said, "Getting him fucking over? He's on a $300,000 a year contract. I'm making $1,000 a night. I'm out here to help myself."
Well, you talk about the way Bischoff presented himself. The last contract that we signed with WCW, me and the Midnight Express, basically Wahoo McDaniel and Jim Ross and everybody, all the agents, everybody was on the booking committee. Everybody universally overrode Jim Hurd because he hated us, didn't want to sign us, and they voted against him. So he said, okay. And the way he handed me our contracts in a manila envelope, his first words were, "You know I was against this." And my reply was, "We were too."
Yeah, and I call my wife, you know, and she'd seen me go through these things before with different people. Which, you know, I had it with Stu one time. Him and I had a big falling out, and I had it, you know, of course, with Vince, and you know, you get these divorces. But I went right away to the payphone. Back then it was payphones, fans. I went to the payphone. I called her. I said, "I won't be here very long." She said, "What now?" I said, "This fucking guy that signed the contract said he said, I've never been a fan of yours, and the only reason you're here is because Jimmy Hart would not leave me alone." So,
but you know, the thing with Bischoff was he spent money like a drunken sailor, but it was all with guys that he wanted to hang out with. He liked to go to Sturgis and ride the motorcycles, and he wanted to be known. I understand I got incredible heat with him one time when I made the comment, because I've never been around the guy very much. We had a few brief meetings, but I said, you know, Eric Bischoff is as phony as his hair, teeth, tan, and talent, because his hair's dyed, his teeth are capped, his tan is sprayed on, and his talent has been fictitious because he tripped over an invasion angle that he saw in Japan and was able to convince the Turner Broadcasting people, because he wasn't a wrestling guy, which became more apparent as time went on. He wasn't a wrestling guy, so he was able to finally convince them that he was a TV guy like them and they should listen to him, and they opened up the checkbook. He signed a bunch of stars that somebody else made, and it's almost impossible to make an invasion angle fail, almost, not completely, as we've seen several times. So, but then once he got that accidental angle, he was not able to keep up with it. He wasn't able to follow up on it, and he put them in a position where they were paying not only the talent so much money that they had to sell out every night forever to make money, but also that they put so much in the TV because his whole goal was beating Vince McMahon's ratings. But the time they spent the money on the TV and the time they spent the money on the talent, they could never suffer a dip in business. They could never do anything but sell out every night forever, or they'd go in the hole. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? They didn't sell out every night for the rest of their lives. They went in the hole and they lost $60 million, and there you go. And Bischoff is the one who laid the groundwork for that. So sooner or later, folks, a blind squirrel will find a fucking nut. And he was successful for 2.5 years.
Yeah, my close personal friend, and you know him very well, and probably one of the premier trainers, and they talk about a great mind in the business, not a Jake Roberts. His mind is all hazed up from years of crack pipe, but Hustler Rip Rogers.
Yes.
Hustler, I love reading his tweets and stuff. He's so honest and everything. He came to me because he was there bringing talent in from Louisville and different places, and would drive them in. He came to me once. He said, they told you you're getting a TV title? I said, yeah. He said, well, the tape you just worked on, you didn't have the belt, right? I said, no. He said, that tape is showing 2 weeks after you should have had the belt. I said, oh. So I go to Flair, and Flair says, oh, we take care of that in post-production. And Rip smartened me up. He said, there's no way to take care of it in post-production. You don't have the belt.
They're going to computer generate it onto your waist.
Yes, so that was the end of my thing, and then the next week in Nashville, they came to me with a finish, and they had some country music star out there and said, he's going to bother you during the match and get your attention, and you slip on a banana peel, and Johnny B. Bad's going to roll you up. I said, I did a Gordon Soley, not tonight.
Oh, and I gotta bring this up. '96, you were back in the WWF for a little while with your most important.
Oh, don't even remind me of that shit.
The most important position, and I was not a fan of this.
That's worse than being WCW. Find my protege after a fucking 6 months. You can't find anybody.
I was on the creative team. Don't blame me for any of this. I wasn't a fan of any of it. But you went on a search for a protege. I came up with Rockabilly, Billy Gunn.
Yeah, a guy's doing jobs every fucking night. He's getting beat every fucking night. And this is a guy you're going to use? For Christ's sakes, you can't find a new guy?
Well, at the time, the only person that Billy Gunn could beat was Road Dogg, and the only person that Road Dogg could beat was Billy Gunn. They were jerking the curtain against each other every night.
They were losing. They were losing. I asked Billy, I go to him, I said, who are you working with out here on the road? Because I didn't know. He said, I'm working with Flash Funk. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing a job every night. You're doing a job for Flash Funk, and you're going to be the next guy after 6 fucking months, and me, I can't. Holy fuck, this thing was dead from the get-go.
Well, I tried to make the statement to him, but it wasn't taken at the time. But I said, you can't put a gimmick with a gimmick. Basically, they thought that somehow Rockabilly was going to be the next generation of your gimmick, and instead, what it did was it made both of y'all gimmicky because you put a gimmick on a gimmick.
Yes, and you know what, my thing, Jimmy, and I'm not tooting my own horn, and some of the fans can say, well, I'm an arrogant prick and all this stuff. The way I dressed and the way that I was overshadowed anyone or anybody unless they brought in someone who was extremely new, who had never been seen before, and then you could promo them guys in.
Or different.
Otherwise,
or different.
My thing was way too strong. It was too strong. I overshadowed whoever it would have been.
You needed somebody that was different, not a rip-off of the same. To me, because there had to be some kind of contrast, and what they were trying to do was it was like Honky Tonk Man Jr. What were you in Florida 25 years ago or whatever when Billy Gunn was born? Somehow you were, I don't know.
Yeah, but, and you're right there on contrast, and I'll smarten the fans up a little bit. When it comes to tag teams or manager wrestler, there has to be a contrast, and you know this. When I was in tag teams, there was always a contrast. There was myself, who I'm the flamboyant guy out there doing the boogie-woogie bullshit, but Larry Latham, Spot Moondog, he was the rough, tough customer in the ring. When I was with Valentine, Rhythm and Blues, I call it Rhythm and Snooze, but anyway, because Valentine was always sleeping, but there was a contrast. Here I am, I'm the guy that goes in, I take all the goofy bumps, I do all the bullshit with a flashy suit. Then when it comes time to get the help to get out of them, Valentine's in there throwing those hammers around.
Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. Ricky was the short, blonde-haired underdog that sold, and Robert was the tall, dark-haired guy that was bigger and made the comeback.
Yeah,
the only time you could find money tag teams that there wasn't a contrast was when you were talking about identical masked guys or identical twins. Otherwise, there had contrast. Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel. We could go on. But if you had the medics that looked alike or the interns, they always had Dr. Ken Ramey. There was they had a manager who was completely different, and also they could switch. They could switch places, so you could get that out of them.
Or they had Las Vegas Louie.
Yeah. who we just saw in as a matter of fact, Lexington at the comic convention.
Yeah, but that's the thing, and I know you guys had these creative meetings and everything, but the problem with the Rockabilly thing was not Billy at all, and Billy blames me for all this, and he will go to his grave doing it. And to be in a position where he is now, wearing a coat and tie and pushing a pencil up there, he shouldn't have that attitude. But people get attitudes with a coat and tie, and they carry attitudes over from their past lives. I knew after this thing went more than 3 or 4 weeks, it was like every week on TV. Here, I'm still looking. It's 6 fucking months now. I'm still looking. For Christ's sakes, it was dead right there from that part, Jim. It was dead from the I'm looking. I'm still looking. I'm still looking. Yes, I'm still looking.
Well, it was nobody's fault because they gimmicked a gimmick. They also took a guy that had been and tried to suddenly foist him into a position. And then, but at the same time, they were wonderful evaluations of talent. Because, I'm a big fan of the Armstrong family, and I kept saying, well, Road Dogg is worth something. But like I said, he was on the Heat crew, too. The buttermilk run, as the Dream Machine used to say. So the only ones they could beat was each other until they decided to do something with both of them. And then the tag team, as all great tag teams and all great things in wrestling, the tag team was not even planned to be a top team. It just, they got together and it worked and they went with it. Same thing as Austin 316. They didn't plan that. The people brought the sign and they went with it.
And they never dreamed this kid, and I said it from the very beginning, the first time I saw the kid. This kid's The Rock, and they were doing Rocky, Rocky, Rocky sucks, all this background noise and shit. I knew right away this kid had the same, he had what Hogan had. He had the looks, he could talk, he could wrestle. He appealed to all people around the world, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Chinese. When you got someone that can appeal to that and the guy could carry the load. They didn't have to do that Rocky bullshit stuff. They should have started pushing this kid right away.
Well, yeah, but see, that's the thing. They did start pushing him right. They just pushed him down people's throats, because I saw his tryout in Corpus Christi. I was there that night, and I went to Vince, and I said, whatever you do with this kid, plan with music, with look, whatever, plan that he's going to be your champion in 5 years, because he's that good, and he made it in 3. But the first thing they did was between the haircut and the Rocky Maivia, and yes, I know it was a nod to his father and grandfather, but the outfit, I don't know where that at. Creative Services was on acid with the tassels and whatever.
And he had a chia pet head.
And the chia pet head, and then they began shoving him like nobody's business. And I didn't mean, when I said he'll be your world champion in 5 years, I didn't mean keep him undefeated from his very first match. There was a backlash because people could tell. And Pat Patterson's done a wonderful job with a lot of guys, but he went too whole hog on that, too fast. And there was a backlash because the people could tell that he was being pushed down their throats without ever having earned it or deserved it, and his talent was being masked by all of the crap that was hanging off of him. But at least he was able to use that fan backlash, and they just threw their hands up and said, okay, well, then get mad about it. And the Die Rocky Die became his motivation to become himself and get over. We knew it was under there. It was covered up by a lot of fucking bells and whistles at the start. And finally that was stripped away, and he was able to do what he could do, and that's what got him over.
It's amazing.
And then Vince Russo took credit for it.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how that company, the WWE, can repackage people. They really can, and they can take years to do it and make them very successful, whereas other companies have never, ever been able to repackage someone and make them from a non-star to a big star.
But what do you think about this? Part of the way that people used to be, before the term even became repackaged, in wrestling, was, and I've said this on the program a bunch of times, you never really, unless you were a hometown hero from the start, you never got over in your home territory. They saw you when you were green, when you were a rookie, when you were breaking in, and just because they shoved you into a main event didn't mean that people took you seriously, with very few exceptions. You always had to go away, go somewhere else, where the people weren't so critical of you because they hadn't seen you from the start, get your shit together, and then come back to your home territory as a more complete package. And that's the way, even Lawler started out wrestling the first match in the Coliseum in Memphis, but he went to Alabama, he went to Mississippi, he met up with Jim White and Stan Bass. It took a couple of years. Then he comes back and he's the hometown star in Memphis. And, the same thing's happened with every hometown hero, but now, unfortunately, there's no place to go. You're on national television from the time that you debuted out of the developmental program, and there's no place to go is home. So now, when they want to repackage somebody, they have to rely on fans' short memories if the guy changes his hairstyle, or maybe it just doesn't work because that was the guy we saw 6 weeks ago, he was somebody else, which destroys his credibility. How is it going to be harder and harder to repackage guys now because the only place for them to go is home?
I don't know how they're able to do it and send the guys away. And I mean, look at Kane. For Christ's sakes, they've repackaged him in total different looks, total different everything, and the guy's still over, but he's still Kane. He's not coming back as a different name.
Well, but remember now, Isaac Yankem didn't get over, and the fake Diesel didn't get over, but then they put the mask on him, and that was a whole different, but that was brand new. That wasn't a stupid gimmick like an evil dentist, which Vince called me up in Knoxville and said, oh, you're going to love what we've done with Glenn Jacobs. And I saw the evil dentist as if Vince must have gone to the dentist that day. And then the fake Diesel was, they were trying to they were asking a guy to do the impossible to redo somebody that had been a big-time personality for him and just rip off the gimmick completely, including the names. That wasn't going to work. But then finally, Kane was something that was not only brand new, that hadn't been done before, but they covered up his face so you couldn't see it was that same guy that they were trying to foist off on us as a dentist and a fake fucking Kevin Nash. And that worked because then Glenn was allowed to be himself as Kane.
Yeah, they're masterful at doing that, whereas other wrestling companies could never, ever send someone away, bring them back 3 months, 6 months later, same body type, same facial expression, something else. I don't know how they're able to do it, but it's the power of their television, and the TV that WWE has is so powerful that they can make you in one night or they can break you in one night.
And then, of course, one of the more remarkable repackaging jobs in the history of wrestling, Sugar Bear Harris never drew a dime, but Kamala was a main event monster, wasn't he?
Well,
did you ever see Sugar Bear Harris wrestle?
No, I never knew him as Sugar Bear. I mean, I always called him that, and he would just laugh,
Yeah.
But the Kamala thing was that it was. And it was done so good. I mean, it was done, and you can't. I mean, when you throw in King Curtis doing the interviews, and it was a beautiful piece of work.
Well, and even before that, when they painted him up in Jerry Jarrett's backyard, when they first gave him the gimmick, because Jerry's whole thing was watching Sugar Bear Harris wrestle, and I love Ooga Booga Man, I call it, but Kamala was a great attraction. But watching Sugar Bear Harris wrestle was more painful than a root canal.
Well,
and Jerry Jarrett came up with the idea. He said basically all reports when he booked Sugar Bear Harris, all the reports from everybody he trusted were that this is the worst wrestler we've ever seen. So he came up with a gimmick where the whole gimmick of the guy was that he doesn't know how to wrestle. He's a Ugandan savage from the jungle, and they painted him up and made him that, and he was a main event player from the first time he stepped in the ring as Kamala. It was amazing.
The only thing I missed was 300-pound Buddy Wayne, the original Buddy Wayne, dressed as Kimchi.
Oh, that was a sight to behold. I didn't know they had that much camouflage in the state of Tennessee as when he was dressed up in that outfit and the beekeeper's mask and everything, so nobody knew it was him. Because you couldn't have Kamala, the Ugandan giant, drive up to the building in a car driving because he's a Ugandan giant. So he had to have a driver and a handler to go. Those are the little details that Jerry Jarrett would fill in, and we talked about before, that people wouldn't even think of, but when they'd see it, they'd know something was wrong. How's this guy from Uganda got a driver's license?
Well, Abdullah, the butcher, he could never talk or anything in all his interviews, but you see him in the airport, you see him down the street, and he had all this gold and stuff on. And but gosh, now let me ask you, because I know you're up on these subjects, and I'm not. I'm an outsider looking in. This Roddy Piper, now I've had these little internet feuds going with different people at different times, but this one seems to be like they want to bitch slap each other and stuff.
Well, they've made up already.
Oh,
Did you hear
have they
about
now?
this now? Yes.
No, you enlighten me. I told you were up on this stuff. I'm not.
Apparently, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you've heard about it, because if you're listening to this program, you're up on all the internet happenings. But apparently, Roddy Piper, on his podcast, which of course doesn't get the ratings that ours does, but but he tries. He's a good young man.
Well, he won't call me to be on the show, and I wouldn't be on it anyway, so that's okay.
Well, see, his ratings would go up. But anyway, apparently Roddy Piper told a story about when he kicked Kevin Nash out of a locker room in WCW years ago, and then Nash took it very to heart that it actually happened the other way, that he slapped Roddy and knocked him to the ground, and
and kicked him out or whatever. And Nash was up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I got to be honest with you, I have a great Cult of Cornette following on Twitter. I have a bunch of followers, and I listen to them and I respond to them. But I'm not at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not the only thing that I'm thinking about in my life, is what's happening on Twitter. But Nash got on Twitter and twittered a bunch of shit about Roddy and called him a cunt and a piece of shit and blah, blah, blah. And then somehow they both and wanted to be on his podcast, set the record straight, and then somehow they both spoke to each other. And within a day or two of Nash calling him a cunt, Nash was apologizing. He's a legend, and we've talked and settled this out all straight. And Roddy's talking nice about Nash. And I don't know, but if somebody calls me a cunt in public, it's going to take me more than 24 to 48 hours to get over it. But apparently they've made up now. I don't know.
Well, you'd have to ask the lady there. Alice, what do you think about that? I mean, if somebody was saying dirty things like that, could you just call them up and say, I'm so sorry?
Number one, I'm hoping I'm not sounding like a robot. Do I sound okay?
No, you're good. And to explain that to the people, Alice occasionally has trouble with her Skype where she suddenly sounds like the robot on Lost in Space. But go ahead, Alice.
Pain in the ass. I was actually awake, having one of my bouts of insomnia when I saw this particular Twitter thing happen. It was about, 1 in the morning here in Los Angeles. And it's just one of those things. It's like, dude, he's nearly 60, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. What the fuck? Yeah, if somebody called me a cunt, yeah, it'd take about a week if I had to weigh that out on a scale. It depends on who's saying it, though.
Do you think alcohol was involved for a grown man to be on Twitter at 4 o'clock in the morning calling people names because they had the wrong story, or possibly the story you didn't like about a locker room skirmish?
Well, if he's anything like my mom, it just could be that he's an older person, and God damn it, I'm talking to two older people. I can't say that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Roddy's always been a different kind of guy, but Roddy at the same time is pretty much, the last time I talked to him last October was the same as he's been for the last 20 years. I think he can find his way home, and I just look at it like it's two guys. One guy was a great promo and a great performer who drew a lot of money and always protected the business, and another guy was a guy who made a lot of money for himself and exposed the business in a public forum. And they had a disagreement, and what the hell? Who knows? Only they know the true story of whether they've made up. Was it all a work? Are we going to see Kevin Nash versus Roddy Piper on pay-per-view coming up? We don't know.
I hope not. Jim, I hate to be uncool, but I don't want to.
And Alice, let me. I can say this from being going on 37 years now in May, will be if you don't have a really, really tough skin and you can't take harsh criticism from everyone, this is not the business to be in. That's just how, I mean, listen, you can't take anything personal because it's not personal unless they are attacking or saying something or exposing something about your family that's going to cause you personal harm, physical harm, or your family personal and physical harm, then, and of course, Jimmy, you know this from years and years gone by.
Well, and I was about to say,
families are off limits unless if it's Hogan and Hogan's daughters in the wrestling business and Kerry Von Erich's daughters, if they get into the wrestling business, now it's all bets are off.
Then family is off limits, except if they're also in the business. And that's what one time when I called Vince Russo up and cussed him out, because I have taken things personally in the past, and to get away from that, I chose to get away from the fucking people that drive me crazy in the wrestling business. But Vince Russo accused me one time of threatening his family and saying bad things about his family, when actually what I said was, besides the fact that his Howl at the Moon kids were very misbehaved, the only time that I ever fucking met him over at Bruce Pritchard's house, and they were shooting everybody with a water hose, I said his fucking wife must be a saint to live in the same house with that fucking cretin. And that's the way I spent his family. So anyway, there you go. There you have that.
Well, there is times when you do take things a little bit more personal than you should, and then, at 4 o'clock in the morning, a couple glasses of wine or a few beers, things start to come out. The old truth serum starts to surface, and you're not one of those, because I know you're not. You don't do any of that kind of after hours nonsense. You never have.
I always do it right during the day, right out in front of everybody. I throw my bullshit right out in front of everybody where everybody can see it.
Absolutely. I don't know what that Mountain Dew or whatever that stuff is you drink does to you, but holy Christ, man. I've always said, listen, if you want the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, call Jim Cornette.
Well, you know, here's the thing. That I'll say this. The thing that has always made me the most mad at people and the most lingering mad at people is not only when they do shit, when they either lie to me or about me or they fuck with my business, but also when they fuck with the wrestling business that I and a lot of other people have tried to make money in, and they fuck with that. That's when I get fucking mad and I take things personally. But it's generally, I mean, I've had people cuss me out over personal things and hugged them and kissed them on the cheek, you know, a day or two later. But about the wrestling business, I have always taken that seriously because it was responsible for me and a lot of other people making a lot of money and having a lot of fun. And I hate when people try to fuck with it.
That's the way I feel too, and that's the only time I get, you know, that little stone in my shoe is when you're trying to, or someone is trying to, you know, cause me difficulty in my ability to make a living, and that is not where we can call each other assholes, motherfuckers, cocksuckers every day, all day long, and you hear that all day long. But to tell another promoter, don't book this guy or don't do this, he's a prick, he's an asshole, I would never do that to anyone. I don't care who someone books. I don't care who Vince pushes. I could tell Vince McMahon, hey, I don't think this is the guy for the job, but if that's the one you want to do, I'm all game. You know, when he told me Ultimate Warrior, I looked at him with my eye popped, you know, with my people's eyebrow that I had long before the people's eyebrow, and I went, "Are you kidding me?" But anyway,
well, you know, and it's the same thing with me and Vince Russo and Paul Heyman. Everybody thinks, you know, everybody thought me and Paul E hated each other even before we did. I always say, but the thing is, I've never called Paul Heyman names in public, besides a liar, because I wouldn't believe him if his tongue was notarized. But
you mean he's like Dusty Rhodes?
Well, he makes Dusty look like Mother Teresa. But the thing is, Paul is a great promo. Paul's a great wrestling mind. Paul, I didn't like the style of wrestling that he presented because it got a lot of people hurt and it numbed people to the angles that we used to do that could draw money, but that's a story for another day, because the point is, Paul's been a success, and Paul has done a very good job at a lot of different things in the business. Vince Russo couldn't book Lassie in a fucking pet shop, and he's a miserable human being personally, and I've told people that. So there's an element of respect that keeps me from calling Paul Heyman names on a personal basis that I have no problem calling Vince Russo those names, because he's all those things and more, and he's a piece of shit, and he's ruined the wrestling business. So there you go. There's two different things. If you have respect for somebody,
there's two different kinds of pricks in this business. There's a personal prick, and there's a prick just that's in the business. So
yeah, I don't have a problem working with pricks from business. I just have a problem working with personal pricks. Boy, that's a lot of peas. I hope I'm not popping my peas there, but you know, we could do this all day, and we almost have.
But let me end with this, Jimmy, because I kind of gave you a little tease on it with the Ultimate Warrior. People, you know, I've been asked to do interviews and stuff, and I don't do them anymore. This is your podcast I did for you. It's the only one I've done since I did the Colt Cabana. I stopped doing those because I have no axe to grind anymore. I have no shoot interviews anymore with anybody, because all the kids out there now, they're all good kids. It was their fathers or grandfathers that were the assholes and pricks to me. So, but to the Ultimate Warrior, I have to say this. It's people have asked me, my neighbor asked last night, how did you feel? Well, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised. What the thing that touches me the most is it's a young family that now will grow up without a father, very much like the Owen Hart situation. Now, that was a shock to me because it was a tragic, tragic accident. But with these other guys that I find out that, you know, tomorrow, tonight, if they call and say so-and-so's passed away, that's not a surprise. It's not a shock. It's just part of our industry, our business. It's that young family now that will go on the rest of their life without a father. That's the sad part of it.
It's a tragedy, but it's not a surprise. There's a difference. You're not surprised with some of these things. And you know, we talked about Warrior on the Experience last week, in that I never had much interplay with him. Wasn't around him that much. I always looked at him as the torchbearer for sports entertainment, style over substance, look over ability. And I don't mean to say that bad, because I looked back and he did draw a ton of money. Vince got him over, even though he had a charisma and he was in the right place at the right time. But he was the furthest thing from a good wrestler, and he was not the easiest person in the world to work with or deal with, from what I understand. But it's not a surprise, because even he said to people, from what I understand, I guess all this shit that I did will cut years off my life. And, if you're just a normal adult human being, you have to realize that doing shit like that and looking like that, it cannot be healthy for you. And I've told the story about when Lex Luger was riding with me in the Midnight Express, Bobby and Stan Lane, one day, and I was driving the rental car, and we were on the way to Atlanta TV, and I'm eating a Wendy's triple cheeseburger with extra mayo, and the grease is dripping down my elbow, and he's looking at me like I've got steaming turds in my mouth. And, I said, when's the last time you had a cheeseburger package? He's like, I had some French fries about 6 months ago. He deprived himself of all of that food, ate clean, worked out religiously, and did, a bunch of stuff that later on in life, now I'm in better physical shape, and this is not gloating or not being happy about it, because I like Lex, but I'm in better physical shape than he is, because at least all I was on was cholesterol. But if you're a grown adult man, you've got to know that if you're making those choices, you're doing those things, sooner or later something bad's going to happen to you. I can't imagine why it wouldn't. And, that's what happened with Warrior.
Yeah, and I saw, and I'll end with this. I saw one time I went to the movies. I don't go very often with my daughter. She was small back then. Young child, she wanted to go see this movie, The Lion King, and I saw this, and the whole thing about this movie was the circle of life. And it is really a circle of life, and we're only in this thing for a lottery, and sometimes you win it, and you're gone early, and sometimes you lose it, and you can stay around a lot. Listen, I love losing this life lottery, because I want to be here as long as I can, but we're not guaranteed anything, and it doesn't matter what you do to yourself. For God's sakes, we know people that should have been dead 50 years ago, and they're still kicking. And then there's others that have gone on, but the sad thing is the young people, the young children, and the young family left behind.
Yeah, exactly. And with Owen, people say, well, he shouldn't have been up there. Well, he was trying to do what, he felt like he needed to do for his job, and and shit like that happens, and then you got kids, and you got a wife, and you got a family that loses somebody, and it's just, you never know. So that's why I decided, as Jerry Jarrett said to me one time, he said, I used to think I hated the wrestling business, but then I discovered once I got out of it that I just hated the people I was in business with in the wrestling business.
You know what? That pretty much sums it all up, and I think we all have a brotherhood. We all have a camaraderie. We all shake hands and hug each other and walk away going, fuck that, he's a fucking asshole. But at the end of the day, we're all in the same business. We all have the same scars on the head. We all made the same trips, and that will never change. And why someone thinks, well, my wallet is bigger than yours, so I'm bigger than you. Come on, brother. Hey, brother, that's bullshit.
Yeah. That's why I said everybody in the wrestling business is crazy. It's just, is do you get in wrestling because you're crazy, or do you get in wrestling and the crazy people in it make you crazy? But everybody ends up crazy. And as a couple of years ago, I just stepped back and said, I'm crazy. Hi, I'm Jim, and I'm crazy. And I'm gonna try to get over that. And
I'm a complete fucking nutcase, and I've been told that 1,000 times. And guess what? I don't give a shit.
Mm. 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 mm, 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 mm. Mm.